Cruise gratuities are a hot button issue. So before discussing cruise tips, I will say there is no right or wrong answer regarding what is acceptable or whether or not you should even tip at all on top of the included gratuities. This is totally a personal choice, and the approaches to it vary widely from cruiser to cruiser. It can also be a controversial and very subjective topic. I see this debate rage in all the cruise message boards, social media, daily. You'll find some cruisers who staunchly oppose additional tipping, but then others who tip generously in addition to those included gratuities. So the guidance I'm about to provide is drawn from both my personal experiences, opinions, and what I see as the general consensus within cruising groups. First, let's talk about included gratuities. Unless you're sailing on Virgin voyages where everything truly is mostly all-inclusive, including gratuities, part of the compensation for cruise ship employees comes from tips. Now, most of the major cruise lines, including Celebrity, Holland America Line, Carnival, Princess, Royal Caribbean, and others, have a policy of automatically adding a predetermined gratuity amount to your onboard account. These are what are called included gratuities. So what are prepaid gratuities? Okay, this can be confusing because these included gratuities are often called prepaid gratuities, but I prefer to call them included or required gratuities instead of prepaid gratuities because you do not have to prepay them. Cruise lines will often ask and even encourage cruisers to pay those included gratuities in advance when they book and pay for their cruise, but you are under no obligation to do so. Cruisers who opt to not pay gratuities in advance will just later see that charge for gratuities hit their stateroom account, generally on the last evening of their sailing. So is it required that cruisers prepay for included gratuities? No, and I personally never do. I see zero benefit at all in paying for something before I have to. Plus, as a business professor, I always get stuck on the concept of the time value of money. Nerd alert. Plus, should you have to cancel your cruise for whatever reason, while prepaid gratuities are generally refundable, I'd rather not have to deal with waiting to get a refund and get my money back if I have to cancel versus not having prepaid them at all. Again, why would you pay for something before you have to? So how much are required gratuities on a cruise and who gets them? Required gratuities are calculated on a per passenger per day basis, and it typically ranges from about $12 to $16 per person per day. The funds collected are then distributed to the cruise line's predetermined allocation formula, and it goes to various onboard staff, including cabin stewards, bartenders, baggage handlers, restaurant staff like waiters, and other generally lower paid staff positions. Now, the value of included gratuities is ensuring that it's not just those customer-facing staff, like wait staff in the main dining room, who benefit from cruiser tips. Because whether you realize or not, there are lots of behind-the-scenes staff and crew who are hustling and working really hard to ensure a great guest experience on your cruise that you may never see or cross paths with. And therefore, you would never tip them directly. That's why I like the included gratuities, because it ensures a fair distribution to all employees. Now, as I mentioned, some cruisers choose to tip on top of those included gratuities. So let's talk about some staff members on a cruise that generally get tips. First is your room steward or your stateroom attendant. This is the crew member responsible for maintaining your stateroom. They clean it daily, they address all of your needs, they make sure that you have extra pillows if that's what you need. So most cruisers kind of generally get to know their stewards. The stewards usually know them by name, so they choose to tip in addition to the required gratuities, especially because they usually are seeing their work visibly and they're seeing how hard they work. Now, there's no hard or fast rule. And again, completely optional. This is just what I do. I personally tip around $20 per person for the week for shorter sailings up to 5 nights and more for longer sailings. And again, this is per sailing, not per night. So if I'm sailing with my 2 children, I'll tip $60 for the 5-day cruise. Now, some cruisers choose to tip nothing, some tip less than me, and some tip more, way more. Again, there's no right or wrong, nor is there a standard. Now, if I get exceptional service, I'll tip more. On the rare occasion I get really bad service, I won't tip extra at all, and I'll just let the included gratuities cover that. Not only is the subject of whether to tip and how much to tip highly debated, but there's even some discussion about when to tip. Some cruisers are convinced that tipping their steward on the first day is best because that ensures enhanced service during the sailing, whereas others prefer to wait until the end, once they've determined that the service rendered was quality enough to deserve an additional tip anyway. As for me, I generally do a split. I tip my steward $20 on the first day with a promise of more to come later. Room stewards generally attempt to meet up with the guests in their assigned staterooms on the first day, greet them by name, say hello, introduce themselves, give you their card so you know how to call them if you need something. So when I meet my steward that first time, again, I usually give that $20 and assure them there will be more later. That way they know I'm a tipper and maybe they will give me better service. I don't know. And then at the end of my cruise, I leave the remainder of my tip in the room on the last night. Another person to consider tipping is the porter. A porter is the employee of the cruise terminal responsible for assisting cruisers with their luggage. When you're getting on the ship, they'll take your bags if you check them, and they'll make sure it gets on the ship. So if you choose to check your bags, many cruisers choose to tip their porters. This can be anywhere from $1 or $2 per bag, or sometimes if it's maybe me and my children and their friends, I'll just give a larger sum for all of us. Again, there's no right or wrong here. I generally do, if I tip per bag, I'll tip about $2 per bag, which is fairly customary. Although it is good practice to tip more if you have really heavy bags or bags that are oversized. Another position to consider extra tips is the main dining waitstaff. I typically choose flexible dining in the main dining room, meaning I have a different wait team most nights. So I generally tip a couple of bucks after each meal. If I have set dining and enjoy the benefit of having the same waitstaff team every night, I'll generally tip on that last evening, around $20 per person in my party for the entire sailing. And I'll hand this directly to the main waiter with the instruction to please share that with their assisting waitstaff.